Welcome to City Week, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Alton West. Today I'll have on an occupational therapist, Dr. Nick Velakos, that will be talking about how to keep your employees healthy on the job. So ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for those interviews in just a moment. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have on a guest from West Georgia Works, Dr. Nick Velakos, that's going to talk about how we can keep our employees healthy. Dr. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's nice being here.
Well, it's a pleasure sitting down with you and talking about how we can keep our employees healthy, because when I think about keeping employees healthy, I think about myself and the things that I can do to make sure that I'm in the best shape to give my best to my employer as well. But you're the person that worked with Kia, and you go out and you kind of talk with employees and making sure that they are healthy, and because we're going to see there's a combination, or there's a correlation of healthy employees and working, right?
That's correct. I'm an occupational physician. Many people don't know about my specialty. Many years ago it was referred to as industrial medicine. It's a board certified profession. It deals with the work injuries and illnesses. And we treat the general population in this area that work. We also treat the workers at Kia as well. And yes, there is a correlation, I think, to wellness and productivity in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about that. I know that, as an occupational physician with West Georgia Works, and tell us where you guys are located, because when we said West Georgia Works, we all have Troup County Works. So tell us where you guys are located.
We're located at 100 Glen Bass Road. It's right off Orchard Avenue.
Okay.
In the industrial park.
Okay, all right. And when I got you on as a guest, I was like, man, this is going to be exciting, because I know we have at the City of LaGrange, and I want to kind of talk a little bit about that as well. We at the City of LaGrange have a health and wellness program, and maybe some parallels to what you're doing as to what we might be able to do. But let me just ask my first question: what are some of the biggest issues that are facing employees today in keeping themselves healthy?
That's a good question. If you were to ask that question to someone like myself 100 years ago, the answer would be that employers are looking to treat injuries in the workplace, keep the worker at work, sometimes at the detriment to the worker. Now in the 21st century, we recognize that the healthier the worker, the healthier the company, and the reverse is true. The unhealthy worker usually is reflected in more injuries, which in turn increases the costs of the product that the company is making. So right now the emphasis is on wellness. If I can make my employees healthy, mm-hmm. they'll be better employees and a better company. Absolutely.
Again, talking about the City of LaGrange, I know once upon a time our insurance claims, and it goes to your bottom line. The insurance claims are up when you have a workforce that have more injuries and things of that nature, absenteeism. You can't work or be productive if you're not there. And saying that, what are some of the things that, as an employee, what are some of the things that we can do to avoid certain types of injuries?
Well, let me make a comment on something you said. First of all, I'm quite aware of the city's incentive program for wellness, and from what I understand, it's excellent. You've turned things around. People are thinking health. They're exercising, they're reducing their cholesterol, they're reducing their blood pressure. So it's definitely having an effect that you can see in your example. I worked at one time for a very large company. It was a Fortune 500, Fortune 50 company for that matter. And the plant manager at this company had this idea that work injuries are like injuries that occur in battle. And so the more injuries means that the battle is raging, and mm-hmm. so that means that there's more productivity going around. So he actually said injuries are good. If I'm seeing injuries in the workplace, that must mean that my workers are working. Well, of course, that's not a really sound idea of how a business should be run. Most of the injuries that I see do not really occur in the workplace. The most common injury that I see in terms of a complaint is low back pain. Mm-hmm. And low back pain does not occur from an injury, from an incident. It just occurs. A person wakes up, they have back pain. They get out of their car, they have back pain. A lot of times they'll attribute the back pain to the workplace, but in reality it's a shifting of the disc, and it gets better very simply if you understand that.
Okay. Now, when you're talking about back pain too, because I notice sometimes how I'm sitting, How much is sitting related to back pain, in your opinion?
It's very important, and I'll ask the parents out there, what's the most common cause of back pain in teenagers? It's posture. And we see people that have back pain and they don't get better, and many times it's because of poor posture, and that causes a progression of complaints. So it's a big cause. In the adult population, the number one cause of low back pain is something called a derangement of the disc, a slippage of the disc. I won't go as far as saying it's a pinched nerve, but that's what's happening. You have a shifting, something is out of place, and through exercise, you get it back into place. Now this is a little bit of a departure from what people are told. And sometimes they go to see their doctor, and their doctor says, "Oh, you have a muscle strain, or you have a muscle pull, and here's some medication, and we're going to get an MRI scan, and we're going to get an X-ray." Well, the fact of the matter is, that's not what it is. It's usually a slippage of the disc. It doesn't require medication. It doesn't require expensive imaging tests. It requires exercise, specific exercises, and that's what we do. We assess the patient. We determine what exercise help reduce the back pain. We send that person home. We empower that person to do the exercises. And what happens? They get better. They get better very quickly, and they stay better.
You know, and it's so, you know, because when you're talking about back pain, I went to a chiropractor last year because I had what I thought might have been a sciatic nerve, and, you know, kind of radiates down the legs and the buttocks and everything of that nature. But I hear you saying exercise, and specific exercise. Talk a little bit about some of those exercises that people can do, and I think a lot of them they can do right there in their home or as they're sitting in the chairs and things of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about that, Dr. Nick?
Well, if you think of your job, any job, and you might want to pay attention to this today, how many times do you bend over on your job? How many times are you sitting? How long do you sit? We find ourselves as Americans on jobs that require awkward bending at the waist. And if it's not corrected, if you don't correct that posture with some extension, some leaning back, you tend over time to develop these derangements. Not all leg pain, not all radiation pain is sciatica. You can have disruptions of the disc that cause little nerve endings in the disc itself to cause patient pain that radiates into the legs above the knees and down the front and down the side. And that pain usually goes away if you extend, if you get the patient to extend backwards, or if you get them on their stomach and they're doing, I think that Cobra exercise, which is, it's kind of like a girl's push-up. Excuse me, but that's kind of what it is. Okay. You extend your back, and a lot of times that pushes the disc forward. There's something else too, and I think what happens with most patients, and let me make it very clear, there's some really good chiropractors that understand this, and there's many doctors, including this included myself, that do not understand this. Back pain is very easy to treat when you understand that it's a disruption of the disc, and certain movements improve it, and certain movements make it worse. But the point I want to make is that the patient gets frustrated with the doctor because they may feel better, and then 2 or 3 months later the back pain comes back. They go back, they see the doctor again, they get medication, the back pain comes back, and then you have people running around here that are on chronic narcotic medication. They're on the chronic use of narcotic medication for chronic low back pain, and they never really get better. They feel better, but they don't really get better. And I'm saying to you, if I'm speaking to someone out there right now, you don't have to deal with that. You can come and see someone like myself who understands the mechanism of low back pain.
And you know, it's so important. You said a lot of great things there. Posture being number one. And then a lot of times, you know, we talk about medication. We're treating the symptom and not the cause of the problem, I feel, as if, you know, because, you know, as you said, sometimes it comes back, and I think about myself, I'm like, yeah, you know, I felt good while I was going there, and then now kind of as I get out of the bed in the morning time, I can feel that, just that little tingling in the, like say, in the legs and areas of that nature. So now I'm thinking about, okay, do I go back and start taking medication? Do I take the ibuprofen to, you know, decrease the inflammation around it or whatever? So again, we kind of seesawing back and forth.
Your mindset, you've been taught that this is something called inflammation, and ibuprofen or Advil or aspirin is going to help that. if you think differently, if you think of the mechanism of what's going on, something is out of place, let's get it back into place. Then you begin to understand that this is easy to treat, and you'll get better.
Okay. And, and I want to go back to that in a moment, but I want to continue on because a lot of great things that we want to talk about today. Now, you recently shared a published article with your staff at West Georgia about synthetic marijuana. We're kind of seeing this being more prevalent in our community, and I think there was a law that was just passed that they pulled all these synthetic marijuanas off of the shelves because there was a young man that died. Talk a little bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about it before and then we'll take a commercial break and we'll come back and finish up talking about it. But talk about that a little bit before we go to commercial break.
I think you're talking about something called K2. It's also called spice. I knew nothing about this maybe a year ago. It started 25, 30 years ago, I believe at Clemson University. There was a chemist there who was trying to develop a cannabinoid, which is a form of one of the chemical ingredients to marijuana, and he was going to use this chemical to determine if it could be used to treat pain. It wasn't very effective, but he found that it had the same properties, the euphoric properties of marijuana, almost, I think, 3 or 4 times as potent. And sure enough, it got into the hands of enterprising people that reformulated the chemical configuration, added some organic product to it, oregano or tobacco, whatever, and it was sold as a very innocent herb that you could smoke, or you could put in your drink, or you could put in your food. And I think initially whatever they had was probably not that bad. But since then, what is on the street now, and when I say on the street, it's legal. You can go to the online and find this product and purchase it. And up till just a few months ago, it was legal here in Georgia, and you could get it over at the truck stop. What is being sold now and what is being dispersed now, I think, is something very, very deadly. It causes a cataplexy. I've seen patients that take this and they just sit there. They'll stare at you and they will not move for about 15 minutes. They don't talk. It causes rapid heart rate, hallucinations. In its worst form, it can cause a severe psychosis. If you listen to the 911 call that was put in for Demi Moore, and you think about what she was taking, it almost sounds exactly like the effects of K2 of a synthetic marijuana.
Okay, let me stop you right there, Doctor, and we will come back from a commercial break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about that just a little bit more, okay?
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. And today we have the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Nick Velakos, and he's talking about, as we went to the commercial break, we're talking about synthetic drugs. And Dr. Nick, I want to go back in and talk a little bit about that because, the media has shown that we had there was a 17-year-old young man that died from ingesting or smoking these synthetic drugs, and you were giving us a little history and background on that. If you don't mind, pick up in that vein and talk a little bit more about those synthetic drugs.
I don't know what the cause of death of this individual was. What usually happens with the synthetic marijuana is you experience a severe psychosis, you rush to the hospital, you go to the emergency room, and these people are basically, they're not talking, they're very paranoid, and they're usually admitted into the psych ward of a hospital. And there's many patients right now, as we speak, across the country in psych wards with this severe psychosis that's the result of the synthetic marijuana, and we don't know how to treat it. And secondly, we don't even know if it's irreversible, that it's reversible. In fact, there's some evidence that it may not be reversible. So this is a dangerous compound that is right now exposing our children to something that has not been that easily available. And like I said, I think it starts with knowledge. It starts with talking to your kids and asking them about what they know about it. Me having a police background as well, I think back in the days when I was policing, marijuana was the most prevalent thing there. And then of course we came on the scene, cocaine, and then we got these methamphetamines and things of that nature. And all of these, any drug
prescribed, non-prescribed, can have dangerous and side effects on a human being. But let's talk a little bit about when we couple drugs in the workplace. And I know that a lot of workplaces have the random drug testing. Talk a little bit about that for us, Dr. Nick.
That's a good question, Alton. One of the biggest eye-opener for me, coming from Chicago, was the amount of drug use in the workplace here in LaGrange. I don't think it's any different anywhere in the country, but you mentioned drug testing. We've done thousands of urine drug tests in the last 3 years. Very few are positive, less than 1%. We've started to do hair testing for a variety of companies, and what happens? 15 to 20% are positive, and they're positive for some really heavy drugs, methamphetamines and cocaine. So we know that something is going on in the workplace. We know, compared to 25 years ago when drug dealing was on the street, it's being done in the workplace right now. It's hard to detect, and hair testing is picking it up. So I think if you start thinking about what that is costing the public, you begin to see that cocaine by itself is associated with about $32,000 annually in lost time, injuries, theft for a company. That's what that employee is going to cost that company if he's a cocaine user.
You're talking about that again. $32,000, because you have to think that employer has invested time, training, and all of the above things in that employee, and we do see that the drugs in the workplace has become more prevalent. I can think of some cases, other counties and communities where you had employees that were caught on tape, going out on lunch break, doing cocaine or whatever other type drugs there. Now, and I want to kind of parallel. I want to ask, because a lot of great information here. I just kind of wanted to ask the question: is your office available for the public? Do you set walk-ins and things of that nature?
We're available for walk-ins if you are injured at work. Certainly if I'm on the panel of physicians at your company, you can ask to be seen and we'll get you in right away. If you've had a back injury or a neck injury, I would like for you to come in that very day and we'll work you in. And we have an excellent physical therapy department at the hospital that, in my opinion, is one of the best in Georgia. So you're not going to have to wait 2 or 3 weeks to get in to see a doctor if your back is hurting, okay? You heard it from me. Okay. That's a promise. All right. But as far as non-occupational conditions, runny nose, we don't see those patients right now.
Okay, all right, well, very good. I want to just talk a little bit about what you do and how it parallels with the City of LaGrange Health and Wellness Program. We have a stipend every year, or each employee gets a stipend every year to go to their physician to have various batteries of tests done, just to kind of, determine, various things. Talk about what you do parallel with how that might be married together.
My board certification is in preventive medicine. The reality is you don't get a chance to really practice preventive medicine. A lot of the emphasis is put into treatment. A lot of money is being spent on Alzheimer's disease, the treatment for Alzheimer's disease, instead of mobilizing the resources of this country like we did to develop the atom bomb to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease. So when I meet someone like yourself who has been allocated $500 a year to put toward wellness, put toward anything that is going to make me healthier, that's exciting, because there's a lot of research now that is showing that it doesn't take much to determine if a person is well or not. And I'll just give you one example. Everybody goes and they get their blood drawn and they're told, don't eat anything after midnight. So you get up, you go down to the lab at 8 o'clock in the morning and you get your blood drawn. And maybe it might be accurate, maybe it might not be accurate. The test that is really accurate is a 16-hour fasting blood sugar. That would tell me as a physician where you stand in a lot of ways. There is a company north of Atlanta called Solera that was given a $1 million FEMA grant a couple years ago to determine why firefighters are dying from heart attacks. No other profession has that many people that have the incidence of heart attacks, and they're occurring on the job, off the job, when they're retired. Everybody knows a firefighter who has died from a heart attack. So this company was given $1 million to determine why that's happening. And so in line with what your question is, you know, what are some tests, what are some things that you can do to determine if you're healthy? Well, they looked at these firefighters, they ran all these tests, and they found that the fasting blood sugar, the 16-hour fasting blood sugar, was the first test. If that was abnormal, then they did something called a calcium score. They did a CT scan of the chest to see if there was calcium plaques. And they found 33%, and I want to repeat that so it's well understood, 33% of the firefighters that they tested had heart disease, had subclinical heart disease that they didn't know about. They weren't having chest pain. They weren't having any of the symptoms of angina or heart disease. It was all subclinical. And of those 33%, half of those people had three-vessel disease, had severe disease. So much so that they had to stop the study and tell some of these people that you have severe disease and you need to be treated. So you have $500, or even if you don't have $500, if you have just a little bit of money, you can do some simple tests through your doctor to determine if you have, if you're carrying the gene, the heart attack gene. It's called the 9p27 gene. So that's exciting. And like I said before, the city is doing some things here that are very innovative. You're getting the results. I applaud you.
Well, very good. You know, talking about that, because I'm one of those, I take full advantage of it every year. I go out to my physician, and just to hear that there's some other battery of tests that employees can go through just to kind of find out, you know, because preventative is what you do, and the only way you can prevent it is by knowing that it's there, I'm sure. So again, Dr. Nick, I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing all this information. And I do want to reserve the right to have you come back on again to kind of talk a little bit more as we learn more about these synthetic drugs and just other things that we as employers and employees can do to keep ourselves healthy and safe on the job. Because of the fact, I think it is so important because, as you stated earlier, a healthy workforce or a healthy environment or employee going to create a healthy work environment as well. So Dr. Nick, thank you very much for coming on and sharing the information.
Thank you.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We'll be back for more City Week in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining for City Week. My guests have been Dr. Nick Velakos, who talked about keeping your employees healthy. I hope that you take those things to heart and also go out and see them if you need to. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you've enjoyed this interview. And as always, I want to invite you back for more of City Week.